Welcome. This is the post secondary transition conversation. We focus on the ins and outs and everything in between of the transition process for families of students with disabilities. I'm one of the hosts. My name is Meghan Smallwood, and I am a public school transition coordinator. As always, I have a co host.
My name is Patrick Cadigan. I am also a public school transition coordinator.
Today, we are lucky enough to have Beth Brady with us, who is the Director of Admissions and Student Services with Sunflower Bakery. And we actually met just a couple months ago because we held our business fair in our county to try and bring families together with the businesses that offer a lot of inclusive opportunities for employment. And Beth came, and I was aware of Sunflower Bakery because I believe they've been around since 2008. Am I correct with that, Beth?
2009.
2009. Okay, I was close. But I had been, previously out to visit when I started working in the area of transition, and I was just amazed by the program. So I was so excited that you came to join us at the fair and we got to chatting. And I was like, you need to come and chat with me and Patrick. So here we are. And just a short snippet about the Sunflower Bakery. It's grown into a workforce development nonprofit serving hundreds of young adults with disabilities. But I'm going to let you tell us a little bit more about the program. But first, tell us a little about your background, because I know you're fairly new to the program, right?
Sure. So I onboarded here at Sunflower in December. My background, so my last previous position, I was the sole behaviorist for 6 schools, K through 12. I had 4 elementaries, a middle, and a high school. And I served students that were the most at risk. So these would be students with significant, what they call tier 3 behaviors. So these are highly challenging behaviors. These are students that are at risk of being placed somewhere else because of their not being successful at the public school. And my job was to come in and hopefully do interventions, coach the teachers, facilitate behavior intervention plan process, and hopefully see behavioral change where the students could be successful. So, yep, it was in a rural area up in Pennsylvania, up in Mercersburg. So I got to see students that were different from students I had worked with throughout Maryland. It was, like I said, very rural community. And it was great. It was a great position.
And so how did you land at Sunflower Bakery?
As you can imagine, or have probably read about or heard about through the grapevine, there's been a lot of cuts throughout the United States, particularly in the disability space.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a contracted employee. So my position, unfortunately, was reduced to detriment of the school system, like lots of people in sort of my positions have shared that right here in Montgomery County, we're facing the same thing. We're with longtime professionals, they downsize positions. So I had, through the grapevine, heard through a friend that about 3 positions that sounded really cool. One was with social emotional learning, and another one was to be a case manager, doing sort of working with people with learning differences. And then finally, Sunflower. So, complete disclosure, I have a brother who is a professional chef who studied at the Scoffier in Paris, who worked at New York's Rainbow Room. So I've always been a bit of a fangirl about, this space. And I heard about this space that trains adults with learning differences. So that's sort of my area of expertise. And then to be in work with culinary arts and pastry arts, it sounded like the perfect job. So I applied for it, and here I am.
That's awesome.
Okay, so we've heard about how you established yourself at Sunflower Bakery. I am relatively unfamiliar with the program. Meghan has had a lot to talk about, but I am curious. Can you walk us through what a typical student experience looks like?
Sure. So we have 3 programs, right? So we have a hospitality program, a culinary arts, and pastry arts program. So if we talk about, so right there's not a typical, right? These are different programs. So we talk, let's say, about a pastry arts student's day. Depends on what phase. We have a phase 1 and a phase 2. The program is 6 months long. So the first phase is going to be 3 months. In that 3 months space, it is going to be soft skills as well as technical skills related to whatever program. So if you were in a pastry arts program, things like how to cream butter, or how to, let's say, use the equipment in that space, the tools in that space. but also soft skills, communication skills, how to effectively communicate, whether that would be with your peers, how to advocate for yourself with a superior, like a boss, how to show up on time, those sort of organizational skills, time management, just that stamina of having to go to work every day, the ebbs and flows of motivation. So lots of students, particularly in this day and age where you have the technology that students are exposed to, that there's this expectation of every day should be a grand day, right? And working that through those kinks of saying that we all have bad days. So even staff will communicate that with our students that, oh, I had a really bad day yesterday. And these are skills that sort of transferable, that not every day is a good day because of, so you're not losing that motivation. So you don't have that job burnout. So those are the sort of the soft skills that we work on. But again, we're working with them for students that have learning differences. So it's sort of simplified and it is digestible for those students.
So you said it's the first part would be 3 months?
Yeah, and then the second part, so now that we're into the second part of our program, that's phase 2, is an immersive experience. So very different from your, other like culinary or pastry arts or hospitality programs where you're sort of doing, let's say you would bake a batch of cookies and then you're taking those cookies home with you, right? Very insulated environment, lots of supports in place as far as, you know, it doesn't look like an actual commercial space. That's what sets us apart. We're an actual commercial space. So students are having an immersive experience. They're feeling the ebbs and flows of production, whether that would be, during the holiday seasons where we have lots of high volume of production versus, let's say, a downsized downtime in like March or something. The same
Mhm.
thing that anybody that would be working in this industry would experience. And as a byproduct of that, when students do go into the workplace, they're having that soft landing rather than this sort of cognitive overload that happens often with folks with executive function challenges. So, in my experience, like working with people with learning differences, lots of them will experience it without that sort of sensory piece where they're getting conditioned for that cognitive piece of it, they end up this sort of job jumping if they don't have that immersive experience often. So I think what Sunflower provides is that immersive experience.
How would one know if they like, I have so many students that are like, "I'm interested in baking, I'm interested in culinary." Would they get, like, an intro to what the difference is between pastry arts, hospitality, and culinary? How is it determined which training they might start in?
Great question. So the process goes like this. The application process is they're going to fill out that application along with their last psychological assessment and their last IEP. I take that information, I review it carefully. So I'm looking at things like pragmatic language, adaptive reasoning, all of these things to see which program they would fit best in, right? So if I have a student that, let's say, has really high anxiety, front facing customer service might not be the space for them. But also, if I have a student, let's say, struggles with fine motor skills, putting a knife in that student's hand could be challenging, right? Also, sensory. Let's say I have a student that lots of sensory issues, but really wants to work at either baking or culinary. Different spaces. Culinary, you have proteins you're working with, lots of different meats, right? You have a raw chicken, raw meats versus something that most of our students, if not all of our students, are familiar with, something that feels like Play-Doh, something that's very reinforcing for them. So, so I'm looking at that immediately when I'm reviewing their IEPs and psychological assessments. There's a lot of tells in there. But then a student will come in for an interview with me and I'll ask questions related to whatever they're interested in. We do a walkthrough to let them see the space and see how they respond in the spaces. So a culinary space is different from a pastry arts space for a bunch of reasons. Things like culinary there's a little bit more leeway as far as creativity, as you can imagine, the measurement piece of it versus pastry where it's very science and very disciplined as far as making sure those ingredients are right, temperatures in the oven, measurements, and then how they respond to that space. We come back in and we have another conversation. But in addition to that, we also will have, if a student is a good fit for the program, then after that, we'll have an assessment, which is a 3-day assessment where they get to see if, the chef will, instructor will give them assessment as far as that space and what's required in that phase. So the fundamentals of it,
Mhm.
nothing major, but there's some measuring involved, some scooping in the pastry. In the culinary, they're going to be putting a chef knife in their hand and see if they can chop the different materials. And after that, a decision is made as far as, recommendations from the instructional staff and recommendation from me. Then we sit together and we make the decision if the student would be a big, good fit for the program.
So it's a very thorough process to
Oh,
decide, which is great to
absolutely.
hear. Mhm.
Yeah, it's very absolutely because as you can imagine, we are working with people that have throughout their life lots of obstacles, right? And I know you, Megan, working with in special ed, know this constantly. There's this almost like a fight to make space for our students. So the last thing we want to do is set anybody up for disappointment.
Right.
So that vetting process and that ensuring that the student is a good fit for the program is paramount.
We hope that you find value in our conversations, and we'd love your support. You can visit our Buy Me a Coffee page to help support the show. A link is in the show notes. Contributions help offset the real costs of producing our discussions, things like online hosting, equipment, and ongoing content development, so we can keep bringing you helpful, accessible transition information. Now, no pressure at all, but if you're able, every bit truly helps. Thanks for listening and giving our community a voice.
And so you kind of answered my question about what skills they might need coming in. I know there was a bunch of soft skills you said they work on that if a parent was to say, well, what should I do now to help prepare them? Those are a lot of things like the time management, the organizational. Is there anything else? I think you mentioned measuring. That's something they could be practicing.
For sure. But like foundationally, you want to be, if you can stand on your feet for 4 hours, right?
Yeah,
There's a lot of standing involved with that. And fine motor skills, of course, but, showing up, the student had to have interest in it, making sure that student is really interested and motivated, I think is really important. Lifting, so up to 25 pounds because there's, heavy bags of flour. There's, your lots of materials and tools that are not going to be light. To be able to carry a big tray out of an oven with 5 or 6 loaves of bread on it, that's going to be heavy for some students. So making sure that their ability to pick up, I think up to 25 pounds, but also that dexterity, communication, like depending on the program, I don't want to leave hospitality out of it. That communication piece of it, to be able to be, I think the reading is at a 3rd grade reading level, and foundational math skills.
yeah.
And all of them, well, you're going to need those foundational math skills. So
Mhm.
basic math.
You bring up a good point, though, because I feel like we lose sight of a lot of those smaller skills that go into just having a job. I feel like I hear from a lot of families and students, like, I want to work with this. And so we'll set them up to practice a skill that, indirectly is going to benefit wherever they go. But then there's frustration because they're not in the kitchen baking. But as you mentioned, can you stand on your feet for 4 hours? Can you lift something? Can you clean up your space? Think that's something I hear. They love, prepping and baking and everything, but they don't wanna do the cleanup. So there's so many things that I think on our end in the school system, we can have them working to prepare for that and be ready.
You mentioned cleaning, and that's also a big part of our program, right? So their students are required to keep their space clean, and they change out different recipes every day. They're doing multiple recipes, so cleaning that space is throughout the day. They're cleaning their space, and they'll be standing there washing dishes for a
Mhm.
good chunk, cleaning the floors. I mean, every Friday we break everything down, and the whole kitchen is cleaned. Everybody participates in that, and having that sort of understanding that it's not somebody's going to clean up after you,
Right.
that it's your job to clean, and it is, it's a group effort. So,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, being part of a team. I heard a student say they wanted to do a certain job, but they didn't wanna clean up. And I said, "But that's part of the responsibilities of the job." And the student said, "But I do that at home. I don't need to do that at work." I'm like, but you're missing the point. That is your job.
Right. Right.
No one's coming behind you. Soon, take
Right.
care of it. So,
Well, and then changing lanes just a bit. And Beth, you have actually touched on this a couple of times throughout the conversation that we've had up until this point. Meghan and I have been doing these discussions now for a couple of years, and I feel like we find ourselves in a fairly unique time because of these funding cuts that everyone is talking about, and so many of the people in our communities are being impacted by. So I'm curious, do you guys receive any funding from state agencies such as, and again, full disclosure, we're in the state of Maryland, so for us it's DORS and then also DDA. Do you receive funding from them?
Sure. And yes, we do. So DORS is one of our partners that we work with. We get a fair amount of our students. So I think up to 50% of our students, 60% of our students, depending on the cohort, because we have 4 cohorts: July, October, January, and April. So depending on the cohort, it varies, but around 50% is DORS funded. We also have private pay as well as scholarships to our program. So our scholarships are through fundraising that we do.
so currently not a DDA provider.
So that they'll reimburse. So they it's not direct, but DDA will reimburse. So
Okay.
they apply. Yeah. So the family or the student will go through DDA, and then they'll pay, and then DDA will reimburse. And pretty upfront about having the conversation that makes sure that all those threads are needled, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be in a situation where someone says no.
And you said about the fundraising. Was that where you guys were selling a lot of items? Because I saw on the website you had some delicious products.
So yeah, so everything relates because we're nonprofit. Everything is about this person centered, right? So the the selling the products is part of what funds our program, right? So no one's getting rich. That's why everybody that works in this space knows no one's getting rich. Everything goes back to what we're doing and working with the students. So yeah, all that the monies that you'll by buying our cookies, by buying our breads and pastries, coffees, that goes directly to funding these programs. Because it's important to note that we have a 2-to-1 ratio in our kitchen of student to instructor. There's always 2 instructors to the 3 to 4 students that are at
Oh, wow.
time. Right. So when people say like, "Oh, this moves really fast," part of the acceleration is the fact that we have that direct instruction. Phase 2 looks a little different. Instructors there, but the students are working independently. The goal has always been, and you know this, Megan, working with students with disability, that the goal is always toward independent,
Mhm.
fading out those accommodations. If a accommodation can be faded, it should be faded. And so that's sort of what we do here, try to move toward independence. So the instructor will be there. Unless the instructor sees a student struggling,
Mhm.
that instructor is not intervening. An intervention could be anything from proximity all the way up to hand over hand assistance with a task.
So this is a good place for us to pause our conversation with Beth. But make sure to come back here in 2 weeks' time as we finish out this discussion because there is a lot more to hear.
Our discussions are everywhere: Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, and others. So hit the follow button and you won't miss out. Please help us spread the word about our discussions by leaving us a review. Links to the information from our conversations are always in our show notes. Surf to our sister website, www.postsecondary-transition.com, full of information and links to more resources. Our YouTube channel contains curated videos that revolve around transition, including playlists for guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, ABLE accounts, and more to come. Thanks so much for your time spent with us, and we look forward to talking again soon.